15,000 years into the future, mankind has expanded out amongst the stars. Peace and prosperity reigns at the center of this union, but the Lancer role playing game doesn't take place at the union's heart, but on the fringes of settled space, as armies battle to either expand the union or resist that expansion. Into this steps our heroes, mech pilots who are among the best of the best. And the biggest question may be, who do they fight for? At least that's the premise of the Lancer role-playing game from Massif Press. And I'll share my review right after this. Happy holidays, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Before I dive into today's review, I do want to mention if you enjoyed the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as Drive-Thru RPG, and to do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our banners. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get a small portion of that sale. You can also make a one-time donation by way of PayPal or become a monthly member of our Patreon. You'll find links in the show notes. Also, down in those show notes, you're going to find an invite link to our Discord server. It's free to sign up, so be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. The Gaming Gang 12 Days of Reviews continues, as today I'll be sharing my thoughts on Lancer from Massif Press. This 432-page second printing hardcover carries an MSRP of $60. If you want to grab the PDF, you can do so for $25. Massif Press indicates that it's a first printing. I gotta be honest, I don't really think there's going to be any difference between the two volumes, maybe a different cover, something like that, because I would be shocked if for some reason this hardcover is vastly different in any way outside of maybe the cover from the PDF. But then, I don't know. I'm just taking a stab. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Lancer from Massif Press. A few things to mention before I get stuck in. First of all, the fine folks over at Massif Press were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. Strangely enough, also right about the same time that I was receiving this review copy, one of our good friends of the Gaming Gang and Patreon members, Gustavo Cavallo, arranged for me to receive a copy of Lancer. So I have two copies. So stay tuned. I'm going to tell you how you can get into the running to win one of my copies of Lancer. And I promise it won't be very difficult to get into the running. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside. First thing we'll do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks worked very hard to bring this to life. So let's give credit where credit is due. Lancer is a science fiction role-playing game. It is focused on mechs, and the player characters are Lancers. So they are mech pilots. They are the best of the best. That's why they're called Lancers and not just mech pilots. I got to say, big selling point for Lancer is the setting itself. Really, really interesting stuff. One of the largest sections of this book is going to be the lore section. It's actually kind of the last thing that we run across inside Lancer. But Gotta say, very unique, very different. Also, something to mention is this is a mech role-playing game. I would not call this a mecha role-playing game. And I know some folks out there are going to say, Jeff, it's the same thing. Mechs are mecha, mecha are mechs. Well, as far as the Japanese are concerned, mecha could be any mechanical thing, and mecha could combine to make a larger entity. Mechs don't do that. So as far as mechs tend to be like walking tanks. Now, I'm not saying that this is just a ripoff of Battletech. No way, not at all. But I have seen some people online saying that, oh, yeah, with Lancer, it's super easy to just make this into a Gundam role-playing game or Neon Genesis Evangelion or even like Full Metal Panic. I don't necessarily see that, especially how baked in the lore is for the most part, especially when we get into like the mech combat and stuff. I'm not saying it's impossible to turn this into a Gundam role-playing game, but you also have to keep in mind the narrative aspect outside of mech combat with Lancer is very, very rules light, and it is not the focus of this role-playing game. The focus is on piloting mechs, mech combat, and the setting itself. Now, I could easily say, oh yeah, this is a battling mech role-playing game. No, I would not say that either, although there's plenty of that here. There's a lot of politics and kind of backbiting. And that's where I think a lot of people really do become rabid Lancer fans, is because of the mech combat and because of the setting itself. We'll get into a little more detail in just a few moments. I will also mention I am not going to take a hugely deep dive into Lancer mechanically, because there are other videos out there that are going to walk you through a lot better than I ever could. Now, as far as the narrative aspect, the outside of mech combat, it's pretty simple. For one, you're only going to be using a 20-sided die and 6-sided dice. So if you are doing something outside of mech combat and you're going to roll a 20-sided die and you're looking to roll a 10 or higher. Now, as far as the characters, you will have what are called triggers, which I thought that was kind of a funny term to use, because I think trigger, it's like, I'm so mad. That's not the case. I would say, well, maybe they could have used the word tags, but they do use tags for something else, which is more just descriptive as opposed to having any sort of mechanical impact on the proceedings in Lancer. So you will have your player character. You've got these triggers. You will have 4 triggers, and they will give you a +2 bonus to your D20. Now, of course, I'm making it sound a little simpler than it actually is. There's additional modifiers. You could have accuracy, which improves, or you could have difficulty, which is going to make things more obviously difficult. But for the most part, you are looking at rolling a 20-sided die and needing to roll 10 or higher in order to succeed. Now, when we get into mech combat, we're still rolling that 20-sided die, but it's going to be vastly different. You're not just looking to roll 10 or higher, and you're going to have a lot of different systems that come into play. You're going to have a lot of different options, a lot of actions. Honestly, as far as the mech combat rules, I'd have thought I was reading a board game. That's the reality of it. That's how much detail is in the mech combat. And I know a lot of folks out there are going to absolutely love that. Whereas other people are looking more for like an anime feel or a manga feel, where the focus is really on the people, not the machines. And yes, that really is the case. So even with Gundam, right? You've got the cool eye candy, you've got, interesting battles and things like that, but it's the characters, it's the people that continue to bring you back to watch new series or rewatch previous series. It's not necessarily just the mecha involved. So we're going to get a breakdown of the player character creation. It's pretty easy. Once again, your main focus is going to be those triggers. It's not as if we have abilities or attributes or anything along those lines. We do have hit points. They are very low, pretty squishy characters. Keeping in mind that most of the combat's going to be going on with these characters inside a mech. So even if the mech is destroyed, it's more than likely that the pilot is going to survive. But the player characters start off with 6 hit points. Every 2 licensed levels, those are our levels in Lancer, you will actually get an additional point of grit. And one of the things grit does is it actually gives you an additional hit point. So for every point of grit, you'll get another hit point. Armor can give you additional hit points as well, but you're not going to have a player character walking around with 50 hit points. It just doesn't happen. Now, as you can see here, we're going to take a look at some of our downtime activities, because even though I said it's really rules light as far as the non-mech combat, there are systems in place. It's just, I think a lot of folks out there taking a look at Lancer for the first time and reading the early sections talking about, how to resolve actions and things like that are going to be pretty much staggered by what they find when we get into the mech combat, because it almost feels as if these are 2 different games. I want to point out, I think Lancer itself is probably a very divisive game. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, right? It's not like, oh, I hate the politics of this game or nothing like that. It's just people who are coming to this thinking, oh, well, I heard the narrative rules are really easy. And they're looking for something where the mech combat is going to be far more abstracted. They're going to be shocked by the complexities of the mech combat. Whereas folks out there who are looking for something that's going to be very tactical and have a lot of different options as far as not only the types of mechs that are available, but the functions, the roles of those mechs, as well as the various different actions that can be taken during combat, are going to be very surprised when they see how light the rules are for the narrative play section. That's what I mean by, I think this will divide a lot of people. Now, I can guarantee you that there are fanatics out there about Lancer, and I can certainly see why. I really could easily see why. And then on the flip side of that coin, I do understand that there are gamers out there who just scratch their heads and they just don't understand what is the appeal of Lancer. And I can see where they're coming from as well. Some cool stuff. Let's talk about cool stuff with Lancer. We've got various different talents. Now, these are talents when piloting mechs. So these are not the triggers. These are talents. So we'll have various different talents, and depending on the license level of the character is going to determine what special abilities that character will have. As far as the mechs themselves, we have 4 different manufacturers. Each of the manufacturers kind of focus on a particular aspect. They also have kind of a unique look. So one manufacturer's mechs is not going to look just like another manufacturer's mechs. Some look very military, very boxy. Others have more of an organic feel to them. And then you're going to see each of these manufacturers. We're going to get a breakdown of the different units that are available. You're going to start with like a core frame if you're building your own mech, and then you can fill in the various different other aspects of that mech based on the mounts that are available and so on and so forth. So I thought this is really, really cool. So as an example, here's a mech that looks more organic in its approach, right? It's bipedal. Something like this, that looks more like something you would see out of like Ghost in the Shell, right? Not 15,000 years in the future, maybe 100 years in our future. So I definitely like how each of the manufacturers will have a completely different vibe to the mechs that they build. As far as the mechs and mech combat, that is going to be the largest section of this rule book. It's got the most page space devoted to it. As far as the mech combat rules, they really do feel like this would be a board game. Like this would be going head to head against Battletech. Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm under the impression that we probably do not have miniatures available for the vast majority of these. I don't think Massif Press sells like STL files, but like for our combat, you can use a grid, but I would definitely recommend using a hex map, just because the hex map allows you for some better options as far as how you maneuver and how you attack and things like that. Just my own personal preference right there. So as you can see, we're still flipping on through these various different mechs. Really nice. Then we get into our toolkit. We are going to get into more detail about running the game. Sadly, there is no example adventure here. We do get example missions, some of those missions, but we don't get an example adventure. Now, there are some published adventures already out there for Lancer. I shouldn't say already. Lancer's been around for like 6 years. Not this book. I think this book was printed in 2024 off the top of my head. But we do have some supplements as well as adventure books out there. Another aspect I thought was pretty cool was the like non-player mechs. So once again, as I had mentioned earlier, that the way these mechs are designed is to serve a particular role on the battlefield. And those roles are also explained here with these like non-player mechs. I thought that was really nice. Now, we don't necessarily get artwork for each and every one of these roles, but that's okay. We get artwork for pretty much each and every one of the mechs. So here you can see this is a breakdown of the stat blocks for those. And this takes up a good amount of page space also. So then we have different templates. And then we get into our setting information. This is our lore. A lot of people like to refer to this as the fluff. As I had mentioned before, I found this to be really interesting. Keep in mind that it's, once again, 15,000 years in the future. Mankind is out among the stars. And there have been various different governments that have tried to oversee everything, some good, some not so good. And now currently there is the Union. And for the most part, the center of the Union, fairly peaceful, although there's a lot of hidden enemies, a lot of enemies within. There are a lot of factions who are looking to overthrow the Union or to take over the Union in order to modify its policies and doctrines to more accurately reflect that faction. So I thought that is very, very interesting. I will mention, though, even though we have this really cool background, we've got this really interesting setting, a lot of this comes across sort of as like a info dump, like a lore dump. I can't necessarily see where tons of this is applicable to the game master. I love reading through this. It's super interesting read, but a lot of it's not going to go very far to helping a game master run an adventure. In fact, this is probably going to be a little bit overwhelming for most game masters. I don't want to necessarily say that, well, Lancer is one of these role-playing games where you really should be an experienced game master to get the most out of it. I mean, granted, that is true, but I also don't want to scare away potential game masters out there and players out there who would really dig the very deep tactical aspects of the mechs and the mech combat and the cool setting, just because there's some complexities to the mech rules. And there is a lot of information being provided about the Union and the factions within. There are different planets out there. So I do know there are some published supplements for various different planets. So as an example, if you wanted to have a campaign that takes place on a world like Arrakis, you certainly could. If you wanted to have a campaign that's taking place on a world that's more like Pandora, you most certainly could. Or like Earth itself, not a problem. Pretty cool stuff. Something else to keep in mind, there are no aliens. There are ancient civilizations that have been found on other planets, a la The Expanse, but no one knows who these people are. Now, we do also have like non-human entities, but those tend to be like sentient robots, AIs, things like that. There is no sentient alien life in this game. Now, does that mean you can't introduce it? Of course not. You could do whatever you want. I don't know if it would really make that big a deal, though, to be very honest with you. I don't know what it would bring to the table that you don't already have with this, because you have a variety of different factions, some of whom are very publicly at each other's throats, while others are more plotting in the shadows. All right. So we wrap up. We get a really extensive index, which I definitely appreciate. We've got some characters from the Kickstarter backer. I thought that was nice. Get our pilot sheet. We get our mech sheet. And that is a peek inside. Lancer from Massif Press. Now, before I swing on over to the other camera, I'm going to tell you how you can get into the running to win my extra copy of Lancer. And I'll make it pretty easy for you. First of all, you got to be a subscriber. Easy peasy to do that. And if you could, please give this video a thumbs up. I know, I can't tell if you have or not, but it does go a long way to helping out the channel. And then in the comment section, tell me, what is it about a mech game that appeals to you? Is it the mechs themselves? Is it the setting? Is it the concept of having, a team of freelancers? Let me know what you think. And I will randomly select one lucky viewer. And then on my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, for January 6th, I will reveal the winner. Simple enough. All right, let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts as well as my review score. Well, you've probably already gotten the impression that I think that Lancer divides people. So there are going to be people out there that are going to be passionate for Lancer. And I think it's mainly going to be the people who want the tactical options and the various different abilities for the pilots, and to make mech combat really feel unique and to make the mechs stand out from each other, where it's not just the same exact thing. And the narrative aspects being really rules light doesn't really matter to them. And I completely get that. And then there are going to be other people who are like, yeah, you know, I hear like all the action resolution is pretty simple, pretty easy to wrap your head around. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I like the setting, sounds really cool. And I want to play as a mech pilot. And then, you know, they pick it up and they get to the mech combat section and their eyes glaze over because they just finished reading this really rules light section as far as everything outside of mech combat, almost everything outside of mech combat. So I can see that. But something else I can see is that this is a role-playing game, which is a labor of love. And it is well supported too. That's important to keep in mind. Because a lot of times we'll see role-playing games come out and then it's like, hey, you know, that's a really cool core book. And then very little, if anything, gets produced. There are published adventures. There are published setting books. I love the fact that you can pretty much set missions on different planets. They're all going to be different. So if you want to have kind of a Dune Arrakis, you can. If you want to have a Pandora from Avatar, you certainly can. I love that. I will mention this doesn't feel like it's a cohesive whole. It's just so different between the narrative portion and the combat portion. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a terrible thing. It just doesn't feel like it meshes together. I also will point out, I wish there had been an example adventure, even though we get missions and we get GM advice. Seeing an actual adventure would really help a lot as far as game masters concocting their own. Now, once again, yes, I know there are published adventures out there. Still, just to have a starter adventure would have been really nice. Also, the lore is super cool. It's really interesting. It's fun to read. It almost feels a little bit too much like an info dump, though, on the Game Master. I don't think it really provides the sort of additional support as far as that setting goes that a Game Master would be looking for. Like I said, super interesting. It's one of the selling points of Lancer, in my opinion. Just would have liked to have been a little less of an info dump and a little more tied in to how a game master is going to run the game. All in all, I do recommend Lancer. I think it's pretty cool. I think there are people out there who will absolutely adore this game. And then there are people who are just going to scratch their heads and think, how in the world did Jeff give this as high a review score as he did? It's just how it goes. So all in all, I give on a scale of 0 to 10, Lancer an 8.5 out of 10. If you're looking for a crunchy, mech-driven science fiction role-playing game with a really cool setting and loads of options, this should be part of your collection. If you're looking for something that's going to focus more on the characters as opposed to the machinery, you may want to steer clear. All right, that is it for this time out. If you liked the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, The Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.